Here's a startling revelation from the Australian Financial Review. It says that we can't solve the housing affordability problem by eliminating negative gearing and ditching the so-called capital gains tax discount. Remarkable. I didn't think anyone, apart from the Greens, was silly enough to seriously suggest that negative gearing was the cause of poor housing affordability. Now, no one has suggested it's the capital gains tax concession because we don't have a capital gains tax concession, just a big tax that investors have to pay when they sell a property, but homeowners don't. And given that over 70% of residential properties are bought by home buyers and that the strong markets of 2023 were fundamentally driven by home buyers, with investor activity well below historic norms, very few people are dumb enough to blame investors for rising prices. But the AFR, which is the worst tabloid rag in Australia when it comes to reporting real estate matters, felt that a new report finding that housing affordability issues were not caused by negative gearing was a shock horror revelation of major magnitude. The AFR article appeared under the headline, "The Real Reason Houses Are So Expensive and It's Not Negative Gearing," which wins my award as the dumbest headline of the past 12 months. So what is making Australian houses so expensive, according to a new report from the Centre for Independent Studies? The Centre's chief economist and former Reserve Bank official Peter Tulip says that it's restrictive planning rules, which have added more than 40% to house prices in Sydney and Melbourne. And for apartments, it's height restrictions, which have lifted prices by 37% in Sydney and by 19% in Melbourne, according to Dr. Tulip's Housing Affordability and Supply Restriction Report. And on the other hand, it claims that a 1% increase in the supply of housing stock reduces rents and prices by 2.5%. Dr. Tulip says there are arguments from a tax policy perspective that negative gearing and the so-called capital gains tax discount should be considered, but it's not relevant to the question of housing affordability. He says the effect of those tax issues on housing prices is tiny when you compare that with the 40% effect of zoning restrictions. So it's irrelevant relative to the big issue that is currently on the agenda. Dr. Tulip says increasing supply by lifting planning restrictions has been proven to spark huge increases in construction and reductions in housing costs. He says that we need to relate the zoning restrictions to allow more housing. He says as a society, we need to be more accepting of higher density and less opposed to new development. We need to put more weight on the interest of renters and future home buyers and less weight on the interest of nearby residents. Meaningful planning reform at state and council level is crucial to fast-tracking supply, Dr. Tulip says, even if it means state governments have to override councils where necessary. Now, while I believe that the reasons we have such expensive housing in Australia are more complex than those suggested by Dr. Tulip, the report does correctly point the finger of blame largely at politicians and bureaucrats for policies which restrict supply and make dwellings more expensive.